Hey guys, Randy Potato here with a guide to the Tangle biome. We'll talk about how to deal with the Tangle enemy pool, the unique trinkets and other benefits and drawbacks to this region, and how to defeat the Dreaming General, this region's Lair boss. Let's start with an overview. The Tangle is a region with high direct damage, occasional bleed, and lots of block generation. This region features above average resistance to all dots. Compared to other biomes, you will get less watchtowers, hoarders, hospitals, resistance, and assistance encounters, and in return you get more oasis, academic studies, and a guaranteed creature den. The region-specific trinkets are mostly related to tank builds, with the major highlights being Clenching Claw and Reverberating Readout. The Lair boss, Dreaming General, is overall the easiest boss in the game, with arguably the best trophies, offering either team immobilization or minus 75% trinket prices. These conditions cumulatively make this the strongest region to visit in my opinion. The high damage can be very scary, especially in the late game in conjunction with ordained buffs, but with fewer dots and relatively less stress than other regions for balance. Hero and skill-wise, you want some way to burn through block tokens, and hitting the back row, specifically rank 4, is crucial. Blind and Weak remain ever useful, as well as a taunt tank who can generate block tokens to further nullify the direct damage. Now let's move on to the Tangle's unique enemy pool and how to counter them. First is the Foot Soldier. This 17 HP enemy spawns with 2 block tokens and 25% death blow resist, making them quite tanky. They only offer 2 moves, either a Trophic Cut, a front 3 to front 3 single target attack that does above average damage as well as debuffs bleed resist, or Shambling Thrust from rank 4, a weak attack that moves them back into position. Next is the Knight, a size 2 monster with 36 HP and 33% death blow resist. Their main attack, usable from the front 3 slots, is Biting Blade, a single target high damage attack that also adds a bleed. When buffed by the drummer, he can use Flashing Blade, an AoE bleed nuke. From the back he only offers Have At You, a weak forward movement ability, and he has a buff, On Guard, that grants him 2 block and 2 very high damage riposts. The Arbalist is a back row damage dealer with only 15 HP and no death blow. Arbalist skills are quite position dependent. From rank 4 he can use Piercing Bolt, which targets the back 3 spots with a big damage nuke and stress. From ranks 2 to 3, he can hit the front 3 ranks with a damage nuke and a bleed. From the front rank, the Arbalist can only use Hip Shot, a small front rank attack that moves him back. If buffed by the drummer with Volley, he can use Serrated Bolt Volley, a party AoE usable from 2 to 3 that also applies bleed. Bullseye Barrett is an upgraded version of the Arbalist with more HP and 15% death blow resist. He has all the same skills as the Arbalist, just made stronger. He also has Mark for Death, which marks a target that makes the hero take more damage from Barrett's attacks. Bishop is a back rank hero with 22 HP and no death blow. Its main mechanic is Penance, where it does self-damage to unlock powerful skills on future turns. These 2 skills are Purge the Unworthy, usable from the back 3 rows against the front 3 rows. This is a massive stress nuke that also has a damage component. The Bishop can also use Serve Once More to resurrect a dead enemy. Without Penance, the Bishop can either use Smite from the back row, an average attack that applies 1 stress, or Strike from the front row, a weak attack with no other effects. Finally, we have the Drummer. This 19 HP enemy has no death blow. Each round the Drummer will act first with a free action. It will either use Defensive Formation, adding a taunt and block along with a buff to a Foot Soldier, Volley, a skill that unlocks a powerful skill on either Arbalist or Bullseye Barrett, or Slay the Wounded, a skill that unlocks a powerful skill on the Knight. On its second action, it will either use Marching Orders, providing a buff to all enemies, or Focus Fire, a small damaging attack that also applies 1 stress and taunt. If the drummer is the only enemy left standing, it will use Death Before Dishonor, a self-destruct damage and stress nuke. Now let's talk about how to defeat the various enemy mashes you will face in this region. A common and arguably the easiest mash is 3 Foot Soldiers. Since you only face direct damage here, obtaining block and weakening the enemy makes the fight free. Some type of block removal makes the fight go quicker, and remembering the Foot Soldiers can't attack rank 4 can help you protect a low HP hero if necessary. Next we have Foot Soldier and Arbalist Barrett mashes. This is a very high damage mash that can hit all ranks. Generally the back row should be the target here, since they also do stress and are easier to kill without inherent block. Pulls and knockbacks are great here, especially if you can force either the Arbalist into rank 1 or Soldier into rank 4 to almost entirely neutralize their damage. Knight mashes can come in a variety of flavors. Sometimes you'll get an Arbalist or 2 in the back, sometimes the Knight will be in rank 2 with a Foot Soldier, or have a soldier behind him in 3, and often will spawn in with bishop and or drummer. We'll discuss bishop and drummer mashes later, so let's focus on the pure damage mashes. With bleed, the knight is generally the priority target. With the foot soldier's inherent block, the knight is often a softer target as the soldier, and thus is the best target of the two. With an arbalist in the mash, they can be the target depending on your back row damage since they lack death blow. Moving knight to the back is a good mitigation strategy, but requires a full party enemy mash since his size always puts him in rank 2 if they aren't full. As always, block, weak, and blind are a winning strategy. One of the more dangerous moves is his riposte buff, so be considerate of which hero you select to proc his riposte. I generally want my tank with a block token to attack, and Bellow works wonders here. One thing to note is that at Death's Door the knight will get a damage boost, so be careful here when setting him to Death's Door, and I recommend using dots if possible to get as many Death Door checks as possible. Bishop mashes generally put them in the back, with either foot soldiers or a knight in front, and often a drummer behind in support. We'll discuss the drummer last. The bishop doesn't do much direct damage, but applies heavy stress, and the fact that he can resurrect with his penance buff and his lack of Death's Door means he should almost always be your first target. Besides just directly nuking him, moving him to the front rank where he can't do any of his stress attacks is a strong move. He can use Purge from rank 2, so to be safe from all stress he needs to be all the way in rank 1, which is why the priority is just killing him outright. Of course, in some scenarios you have more stress recovery than HP, and facing ordained knights and foot soldiers can kill you, which would seem to make them the priority target, but even then you need to keep an eye on his penance so he can't revive them. Corpse Clear works to block his revive, but again, you're better off just nuking the bishop when you can. The drummer will always spawn in the back rank, generally rank 4, and is immovable, though you can move other enemies with knockback, assuming he hasn't already cast his buff. He will always get a free action before you, either taunting a foot soldier or unlocking a powerful skill for the knight or the arbalist. This is in addition to the attack he will do in the normal turn order, either buffing the party or applying stress and taunt to one of your heroes. The drummer should generally be your top target, not only because he self-destruct nukes if he's last alive, but because he's just so obnoxious. You need multiple sources of rank 4 damage usually, because you'll have to waste a turn dealing with a taunt. It's a bit easier to kill if he buffs a knight or arbalist instead, but of course that comes with much more damage. Thankfully he has no death blow, which makes the kill easier, but it's worth noting his free action does not tick his dot damage, so direct is usually better to finish him off before he gets another buff, instead of waiting for the dot tick on his real turn. As said before, you can't move him, and using knockback to bring him to the front does nothing except make it easier to hit him, and if you're constructing your team right, you shouldn't have any problem hitting rank 4 as is, since it's necessary to beat the general and the Act 2 boss. Speaking of the general, let's move on to him. As said earlier, I believe he's the easiest and most consistent Lair boss, and in general, gives the best rewards. That said, without preparation, he can easily wipe a party. The primary mechanic here is the taproot. The general takes up the front 3 ranks and gets 1 attack per round. The taproot spawns behind him and does no direct attacks and cannot be killed. Starting on turn 1, the root will begin raining its vines of terror down upon you. You do not have to interact at all with the root on the first turn, and in fact it's bad to interact with it at all. This means your first turn should be either setting up your tanks and or raining as much punishment on the general as possible. On the start of round 2 and all subsequent rounds, the root will randomly lower 2 vines on your heroes. This marks the beginning of the mechanic. Nothing happens with the vines in this middle position, but if you let the root lower them on you again next turn, your hero will become immobile and forced to stress the party and not attack. You must hit the root to have it randomly select a vine to recall, so if you consistently hit the root twice a turn, you will never become stuck. This is the preferred strategy. Importantly, the hit does not have to do damage. Any non-damaging attack, such as Bellow, or even combat items, such as Crow's Feet or Linseed Oil, are effective in forcing the root to release the vine. However, hitting the vine is not free. Each time you attack the root, it will react to the attack. If you hit it twice, which you should be doing every round starting round 2, it will apply a debuff randomly to 2 of your heroes, which unlocks the general super nuke attack, capable of bringing even some full HP heroes to death's door along with stress. Notably, this attack ignores any blind tokens you apply on the general, but obeys dodge, block, and weaken. So using those tokens when you've unlocked the general's Waking Dead is a strong play. Without this debuff, the general only gets his normal whisper attack, which does small damage but party-wide stress. This is why I recommend bringing as many combat items as possible and use them to deal with the root so you can flood the general with damage to end the fight before any meltdowns happen. This is the best and only use I found for linseed oil, since it's cheap and you can stack it up to 4. With just 2 stacks of 4 on 2 separate heroes, you can ignore the taproot entirely with your hero's attacks and melt the boss, thus avoiding most of the stress nukes. Of course, AoE attacks like Abyssal Artillery and Plague Grenade work great, but it's always better to just do direct damage to the general if possible. Any well-constructed team with just 3 to 4 combat items should be able to finish the general in 4 to 6 turns, even in the first region. Knowing when to stop attacking the root and focus on the general is a fine art. He has a brutal 50% death blow resist, so dots are huge. One thing to note is that the vines will always full retreat on a hit, so sometimes allowing one of your less important heroes to get immobilized in order to finish rushing the boss can be a good strategy. Just make sure you have a plan to get them out before you have a full party immobilization. While this does not actually end the run, since once all your heroes are locked, the general will launch a Giga Nuke and free them, it's not recommended. Overall, just play safe and hoard combat items if you know you'll want to face the general at some point in your run. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I post new videos every day.